Hey guys, this is Brandy with Dream Run Dog Training. I own this business. Most of you know me. You know I do just general obedience training with people and their dogs around Raven County and surrounding counties. But I also do service dog training. And service dog training is actually how I got into dog training to begin with. I didn't start with general obedience. I started with service dogs, specifically diabetic alert dogs, almost 15 years ago. And since then I've branched out I've done a couple of hearing alert dogs. I've done, let me think, mobility assistance dogs for various disabilities, and psychiatric service dogs. So that's 4 different types of service dogs that I have worked with. And it's been a lot of fun. I've sent them literally all over the country. Massachusetts, Oregon, Tennessee, Alabama. A lot have stayed here in Georgia. So it's been quite a journey. And I wanted to make this video because we are currently working on changing the state law for Georgia in regards to service animals. Now, I know most people are very unaware that state laws even exist for service animals. Most people just kind of think that it's only the federal law, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And even on the ADA side, there's a lot of confusion. So I want to clear up all the ADA confusion and just set it all straight. So the ADA is the law that basically all it does is just grant what we call public access to service dog handlers. It gives service dog handlers the right to have their service dog in a non-pet friendly public space. Movie theaters, malls, restaurants, that kind of stuff. And the ADA defines a service animal as a dog, or in some cases a miniature horse, that has been trained to do work or perform tasks that directly mitigate the handler's life-altering disability. So what does that really mean in layman's terms? It means that if you want a service dog, you have to have some sort of disability that impacts your day-to-day life to go along with the service dog. You can't just have a dog that is very well trained for the sake of having a dog in public because you think it looks fun. It's actually not fun. And there are many, many reasons that I could go into, but that would take too long. Just take my word for it, it's not fun. So whenever a service dog handler takes their dog or miniature horse into a public space, the employees of that establishment can ask 2 questions. 1, is it a service animal required because of a disability? I am so sorry. Is it a service dog or service miniature horse required because of a disability? And 2, what work or tasks has this animal been trained to perform? And the caveat to that second question is emotional support, not a valid response. Don't get me wrong, there are psychiatric service dogs, and then there are ESAs. They are 2 completely different things, and the difference is the training. Service dogs go through an average of 2 years of training. It takes a long time and a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on the part of somebody like me to train a service dog. These dogs go through what we call general obedience training, just, sit, stay, come, walk on a leash, that kind of stuff. They go through what we call public access training, learning how to behave in a public space because your dog isn't going to be behaving the same in a library as he is in, say, a mall. It's not the same environment to the dog. You have to get the dog used to all kinds of environments and teach them how to behave in all kinds of environments. And then we do what is called task training. And this ties into the second question of what's the dog been trained to do to mitigate your disability. And that varies a lot based on what the dog is assisting with. And a lot of people kind of tend to think that second question is a violation of HIPAA. It's definitely not. They're not asking us what is our disability. They're just asking what the dog has been trained to do. So I can say that my dog is a medical alert dog, and they're not getting my personal medical information. They're just getting what my dog does for me, if that makes sense. Somebody with a seizure alert dog could say the same thing. It's a medical alert dog. Somebody with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS. I've trained a dog for a couple of dogs, I think, for POTS at this point. Those handlers can say the dog helps me physically so that I don't pass out or fall down, depending on the person. So the obedience training, public access training, task training, it takes about 2 years. And for a psychiatric service dog specifically, think about like PTSD. The person might be triggered by people coming up behind them. So the dog would be trained to stand behind the person, to block people coming from behind, and also to alert the handler when somebody is approaching from behind. The dog could do what we call orbit, where they're walking circles around the handler if the handler is triggered by people getting too close on all sides. That dog orbiting the person creates a space bubble, a bigger space bubble than they would otherwise have. There's a very long list of tasks that a psychiatric service dog can do. An emotional support dog doesn't go through any training at all, not even obedience training to qualify. In order to have an ESA, you just need a letter from whatever medical professional is treating you for your mental disability, and that's it. And an ESA, they used to be able to fly on planes, but unfortunately, too many people were abusing the laxity of the law. So they would buy these certifications off the internet to take their pet on a plane with them. And because that became such a problem, the Air Carrier Access Act, which governs service animals on planes, it was completely rewritten. And it was rewritten to completely exclude ESAs now. So now it's only service dogs that can fly. They threw out miniature horses too. So it's only service dogs that can fly. And we have to fill out paperwork before we fly. So really what happens is people abuse the rules and then disabled people pay the price, unfortunately for us. But getting back on track with the ADA, one of the big misconceptions is that you have to have your dog labeled in some way, like be it a vest or a leash wrap or a collar, something that says service dog. Service dogs do not have to be labeled. They don't have to wear a vest. In certain circumstances, they actually don't need a leash either. There are 2 exceptions to the leash laws when it comes to service dogs. They can be off-leash if the leash interferes with the handler's disability, or if the leash interferes with the dog's ability to perform a task. So like I knew somebody who had a mobility assistance dog. They were in a manual wheelchair. And if you think about it, think about being in a grocery store in a manual wheelchair and you're trying to push yourself along, you're trying to hold your dog, you're trying to grab things off the shelf. That's a lot. You don't have 8 hands to do all this stuff. So what they did was they had their dog just walk next to their wheelchair off leash, and then the dog could grab stuff off the shelf and hand it to the handler to put in a basket or whatever they were using at that time. And that way the leash wasn't interfering with their disability or the dog's ability to get stuff off the shelves. So that would be an example of an exception to leash law. If the leash does not interfere with your disability or the dog's ability to task, you have to keep your dog on a leash. One of the other misconceptions is paperwork, the dreaded paperwork. You do not need paperwork to have a service dog. As we already covered, they can ask, is it a service dog required because of a disability? And what work or tasks is it trained to perform? There's nothing in there that says they can ask you for any kind of proof on paper that it's a service dog. They can't. That's illegal. There are registrations and certifications that you can buy off the internet, but if you read the fine print, they have to tell you that it means nothing legally, because it doesn't. So just buying that thing off the internet does not make your dog a service dog. You can and will be in trouble for misrepresenting your pet as a service animal. I forgot how many states Nicole said it was. 30 or 31 states have laws on the books that say it is illegal to represent your pet as a service animal if it is not a service animal. So don't do that. Let me see what else. I wrote some down. Yeah, I think that was... Okay, so service animals actually can be legally removed from a premises if the dog is disruptive and the handler does not take immediate and effective action to control said dog. For some reason, a lot of people are under the impression that once you say it's a service dog, you're home free. It doesn't matter what the dog does once it's in the store. This is not true. If your dog is acting a fool, being disruptive, and the handler doesn't take both immediate and effective action to control it. Meaning, if you try to correct your dog and it doesn't work, the dog is still acting out, you can legally be asked to leave with your dog. And you should be. Even if it is a legitimate service dog that's just having an off day, because we need to be respectful of everyone else who is shopping in that establishment. Which leads us into the Georgia state law. Georgia state law, the definition of a service animal is much more stringent. It's much more strict. It's much more narrow. Georgia state law only defines a service animal as a dog that has been trained by a program that trains service dogs, like if you got your dog from Dream Run. And it only recognizes dogs for visually impaired people, hearing impaired people, and physically disabled people. So they completely disregard medical alert service dogs, and they disregard psychiatric service dogs. They also disregard owner-trained service dogs or people who hired a private trainer that doesn't work for a program like mine. Which, that's a very, very large chunk of the population of service dog handlers in Georgia. So most people kind of have this tendency to think that federal law always overrides state law. This is not true. If that were true, we wouldn't even have state laws. We wouldn't need state laws because what would be the point? They would just be overridden by federal all the time. In reality, when it comes to service animals, it's whichever one has the most freedom for the service animal handler. So in this case, federal law does trump state law. But if we look at Wisconsin, for example, their definition of a service animal is any animal trained to mitigate a handler's disability. So I was actually scrolling through Facebook one day and I came across somebody who has a service cat. And they live in Wisconsin, so it's legal there. They can't leave their state or do anything with their service cat. But as long as they're in Wisconsin, they're covered. In that case, state law actually overrides federal law. But when it comes to Georgia, it's a little more complicated than that, because if you do meet this overly strict definition, then you are qualified for the extra protections afforded by the state laws. Because the Americans with Disabilities Act, all it does is grant access. It doesn't address things like service dogs in training and whether or not they're allowed in public. It doesn't address harassment of a service animal by another human. It doesn't address harassment of a service animal by another dog. It doesn't address injury to a service animal. There are so many things it does not address, and it leaves it up to each individual state. But if you're in Georgia and you have an owner-trained service dog, if you have a psychiatric service dog, if you have a dog that's for a medical issue, like a medical alert dog, not something for physical disability, then you don't get any of the extra protections from the state. You just get the protection from the ADA to have your dog, and that is it. Which is it's not good. It has harmed so many service animal handlers, myself included, because it also doesn't have any protection right now for service dogs in training. So my dog actually does have some tasks related to a physical disability, hypermobility spectrum disorder. Her main task is medical alert for diabetic alert. But since she has some tasks that assist with a physical disability, she would have been covered if she was fully trained. But she wasn't fully trained at the time. We were in Walmart. There was an older gentleman who had his Yorkie on a retractable leash, which is a whole separate conversation as to how I feel about retractable leashes. Anyway, I was coming up to like where it rounded the corner, and his dog comes around the corner to where we are. The leash isn't locked. He can't even see his own dog at this point. And the first thing his dog does is bite mine on the face. And because there was no law protecting service dogs in training, and no law against misrepresenting your pet as a service dog, because it was wearing a service dog vest and it was very obviously not a service dog, there was nothing I could do. And that frustrates me to no end, because that one incident set her back years in her training. She still gets a little on edge when she sees a small dog because she's like, oh, is that gonna get me? Do I need to be worried? Is something we have to continually work on with her. All because one person decided, oh, I just wanna have my dog with me. Don't do that. Please do not do that. So that is one thing we want to address within the Georgia state law. One thing we also want to address is there's a lot of inconsistencies in this law. For example, it says that every person engaged in the training of a guide dog or service dog will be allowed in public, basically, so long as such trainer is identified as an agent or employee of a school for seeing eye, hearing, service, or guide dogs. Service dogs meaning dogs for physical disabilities. So that's trainer's rights. And that as long as I'm identified as being with Dream Run, because Dream Run does train some of these types of service animals, I am covered with a service dog and training in public. However, in the next subsection, it says every person engaged in the raising of a guide dog for training, so in layman's terms, that's a puppy raiser, they have the same right to be accompanied by such dog being raised for training, so long as, here's what I don't understand. They have 3 criteria they have to meet for puppy raisers. Dog has to be held on a leash, under control, yada yada, of the person raising such dog for an accredited school for seeing, eye, hearing, or service or guide dogs. So if you're an actual trainer working for a program, it doesn't have to be accredited. But if you're raising a puppy for a program, it has to be for an accredited program. Such person has on his or her person and available for inspection credentials from the accredited school for which the dog is being raised. So not only do they have to be working for an accredited school, they also have to have on their person the credentials for this school. And such dog is wearing a collar, leash, or other appropriate apparel or device that identifies such dog as being with accredited school for which such dog is being raised. So the regulations they put on a puppy raiser are so much stricter, so much more strict than an actual trainer with a service dog in training in public. That doesn't make any sense at all. We're going to fix that. That's one of our goals, is fix that. And then when you go over to violations, it changes again. The verbiage changes. We go from service dog to assistance dog. Assistance dog means a dog that has been trained by a licensed or certified person, organization, or agency to perform physical tasks for a physically challenged person, including guide dogs, leader dogs that guide individuals, hearing alert dogs for deaf of hard of hearing people, and service dogs for individuals with disabilities other than blindness or deafness, which are trained to perform a variety of physical tasks. So again, we're still excluding psychiatric and medical alert. But why did we change verbiage all of a sudden and make them assistance dogs? And also, recall that when it's a service dog trainer with a service dog in public, it just has to be a trainer working for a program. The puppy raiser has to be working with an accredited program and have upon their person inspection or available for inspection the credentials for the program. Now we're suddenly changing it, and it's a dog that's been trained by any licensed or certified person or organization or agency. So this means it could be just a private trainer that helped you train your service, that trained your service dog. It doesn't have to be someone that's working for a program specifically. And this only applies to harassment of an assistance dog penalty. So we're gonna bring some congruency in here and make it just one definition throughout, one requirement. That's it. We're not doing all this changing all the time throughout the whole thing. No. So as it stands right now, there is nothing in here about misrepresenting your pet as a service dog, but there is protection for harassment. So right now, harass means to engage in any context or any conduct directed towards an assistance dog, knowingly likely to impede or interfere with the performance of the dog, basically. Any person who knowingly and intentionally harasses or attempts to harass an assistance dog, knowing that dog to be an assistance dog, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction thereof shall be punished by imprisonment for not less than 90 days, or a fine not to exceed $500, or both. So that's harassment. Any person who has received notice, if I give you a warning that your behavior is interfering with my assistance dog, and you continue to knowingly and intentionally harass it, then upon conviction shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction thereof shall be punished by imprisonment not less than 90 days, or a fine not to exceed $500, or both, provided that any person who is convicted of a second or subsequent violation of this subsection shall be punished as for a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. And let's see, if any person who knowingly and intentionally allows his or her dog to harass an assistance dog, that is also a misdemeanor, imprisonment for not less than 90 days, fine not to exceed $500, or both. And lastly, person who knowingly and intentionally allows his or her dog to cause death or physical harm to an assistance dog by rendering a part of the assistance dog's body useless, or by seriously disfiguring the assistance dog, knowing the dog to be an assistance dog, shall be punished as for a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. So we're going to add in that it's going to be a misdemeanor. I'm pretty sure a misdemeanor to, maybe it was, I don't know, I have to go back and look again. It was either misdemeanor or misdemeanor of high and aggravated nature. Pretty sure it was high and aggravated nature to misrepresent your pet as a service animal. That is one of the things we are adding into the new bill. Another one is, instead of it just being a misdemeanor to harass a service animal, allow your dog to harass a service animal or cause injury or harm or death to a service animal. All of those things are now going to be a felony. So maybe stop taking your pets into Walmart because there's fixing to be a lot of felonies, I'm pretty sure. And we're going to also broaden the state definition of a service animal or service dog to match the definition afforded by the ADA. It's not just going to be certain types of service dogs trained by organizations. It's going to be all service dogs trained by anybody. It doesn't matter who trained the dog, as long as the dog is doing a task that mitigates your disability, that's fine. It's a service dog. And then you will also be, qualified. You will qualify for these extra protections against harassment and injury to your dog and all this other stuff we got going on. And the reason that this is so important is because if a dog is constantly being harassed by other dogs, like every other time I go to Walmart, it seems like there's dogs in the store, and 9 times out of 10 they are barking at my dog. I was just in the store today and there was 3 dogs in there. Thankfully none of them barked at my dog, but one was an incredibly nervous looking German Shepherd. And dogs who are that level of nervous and anxious, they're more likely to tend to lash out. So that was very scary for me, especially since they followed me down one of the frozen food aisles. And all I could think in that moment was, if that dog gets too close, it might lash out at my dog, and I might lose my dog. I might lose my independence. And if a dog even if a dog does not attack a service dog, if the only dogs that a service dog is ever seeing are aggressive and trying to attack it, it's eventually gonna become reactive. That's just how it is. No matter how well trained the dog is, no matter how many years the dog goes through training, if it only has bad experiences with other dogs, it's gonna react accordingly. There was another service dog handler within Raven County who had a psychiatric service dog. So this handler did not have any legal recourse for what happened to him because it was a psychiatric service dog and not for physical disabilities. And his dog was harassed and harassed and harassed and harassed by other dogs in Walmart. And then his dog ended up being attacked twice in Walmart. So now his dog, whenever he takes that dog in public, she is so nervous that she she can't be a service dog anymore. She had to retire. And in a matter of days, this person lost every shred of independence they had gained over the past 3 years that they had had the dog. Like, just let that sink in for a minute. In a matter of days, somebody was so stripped of their independence because people are selfish and they wanted to take their pet to the grocery store. And because this was a psychiatric service dog, there was no legal recourse for this person whenever his dog got attacked, both times, and harassed. And that is one of the many, many stories that inspired the change to the service dog law. This new bill, it's called the Mara Jade Act, because the young woman I mentioned before who's heading all of this up, she had a dog named Mara Jade. Really pretty poodle. I actually met the poodle not long before she had to retire, said poodle. Because Nicole took Mara Jade to Dragon Con. Somebody had their service dog in the convention, and it attacked Mara Jade, and it bit her across the face, and that dog is now blind because of the damage that the other dog did to it. So obviously Mara Jade had to retire and can't be a service dog anymore, which means Nicole lost her independence for a minute there until she got her current service dog, Dojo. But because Mara Jade was an owner-trained dog, and because Mara Jade was a psychiatric service dog, there was nothing Nicole could do to prosecute the other person. I was going to say handler, but not really service dog handler. The owner of the fake service dog. And because there's no law currently against misrepresenting your pet as a service dog, she couldn't go that route either. Like, her hands, she consulted a lawyer, and even the lawyer was like, yeah, your hands are tied on this one because of the way Georgia state law is written. And that is what inspired this entire thing. I could sit here and I could tell you story after story after story of service dog handlers who have lost their independence because of situations like this. It's not okay. I don't know why people think that it's okay to be taking their pets into non-pet friendly places. And when I'm in Walmart and people have their dog that's barking at my dog and trying to eat my dog, they don't really do anything about it. They're not taking any immediate and effective action to control their dogs. 9 times out of 10, it's a small dog, and the owner's sitting there going, oh, honey, oh, that dog is so much bigger than you, it could eat you, and then they just kind of go on. They don't actually correct their dog, and it drives me insane, because it is a big deal. I don't know why people think it's not, but I'm hoping in making this video that people will start to understand how much of a big deal this is. So yeah, that is pretty much the extent of what we're doing in the Capitol and trying to change the laws and trying to provide better protection for service dog handlers in the state of Georgia. If you have any questions or comments about it, feel free to leave them in the comment section or DM me. I'm always happy to answer questions about service animals. If you are interested in possibly getting a service animal, then also DM me. I can help you with that. If you need a type of service animal that I don't train, I might be able to help you, point you in the right direction. But other than that, yeah, I will see you guys in the comment section.